respective jobs can often be tedious for all of us. However, there were certain jobs in history that weren't just hard, but downright absurd, horrendous, and disgraceful. Here we look at 10 of the worst jobs from history. Number 10. Egyptian mummifier. Artificial preservation of the corpse, or mummification, was a prevalent custom in ancient Egypt. Mummifiers were, hence, in much demand in those days. To mummify the corpses, they had to remove and wash their internal organs. The mummifiers also had to then remove the brains from the corpses by shoving a hook up its nose and extracting the remains. This gross process took weeks, sometimes even months to prepare. Unfortunately, Egyptian mummifiers were looked down upon and were shunned from their communities as they dealt with dead bodies. Number 9. Sin Eater. The job of a sin eater, traditionally performed in the 19th century, required one to help cleanse the dying person's soul. While this may not sound too bad in concept, in reality this job was very disturbing. They had to eat beside the corpse and thereby take the sins of the dead person upon themselves. The sin eaters lived in poverty, were considered as outcasts, and were shunned by almost everyone. They were only summoned when someone had died. Moreover, the sin eaters would get paid in ridiculously small amounts, even while they absorbed all the sins of the dead person through intricate rituals and eating and drinking near their bedsides. Number 8. Tanner. Tanners played a vital role in preserving the hides of animals that were used in manufactured goods. The tanners had to remove the hair from the animal's skin by soaking it in urine or letting it hang to rot before cutting it with a knife. To soften the hide further, the tanner had to re-immerse the cleaned hide in a pit of water that contained dog feces. It was hence a truly revolting and foul-smelling job. Despite doing a very important job, leather tanners were often looked down upon. Number 7. Leech collector. Leeches were in great demand in the late 19th century for medicinal purposes. A leech collector's job was to plow through leech-infested marshes and collect as many leeches as possible each day. Although the demand for leech collectors was high, they were paid abysmally. What was worse was often these people had to collect leeches by allowing them to stick to their legs. This was highly dangerous, as it meant the leech collectors would lose a lot of blood in the process. Number 6. Whipping boy. A truly absurd and cruel job was that of a whipping boy. In early modern England, a young prince was usually assigned a playmate who would also be his whipping boy, meaning he would be the stand-in for taking all the physical punishment handed out for the prince's misdemeanors. What was even crueler was that the whipping boy would even be allowed to forge a strong bond with the prince and would also be educated along with him. Number 5. Resurrectionist. During the 18th and 19th centuries, resurrectionists, also sometimes called as body snatchers, were paid to supply fresh corpses for medical study in universities. In those times, just a set of teeth was worth a lot of money. For getting the corpses, the resurrectionists had to tunnel into the graves from a little distance to avoid disturbing the ground. Once done, they had to drag the lifeless bodies out of the graves with a rope. The resurrectionists also had to ensure that no personal possessions of the corpses were lost or stolen in the process, as that would have meant committing a felony. Number 4. Bone grubber. This disgusting job required the bone grubbers to scavenge for decaying bones from butchers, garbage piles, and stockyards, and then sell them to traders. Also called as the rag and bone man, the bone grubber usually lived in extreme poverty and sometimes had to wade through sewers at low tide and search for bone fragments found in the gutters. These bones would then be used for creating personal items. Number 3. Petardier's assistant. This was a really hazardous and life-threatening job. In early wars, especially during the Civil War, a person would be assigned the role of attaching very simple and primitive explosive devices, also called as petards, to enemy targets. After attaching the device, the Petardier's assistant had to light the fuse and run away to safety. More often than not, this job would result in the death or led to gruesome injuries to the Petardier's assistant. Number 2. Barber surgeon. Barbers in the Middle Ages weren't just required to cut hair. They were also assigned to perform a lot of surgical procedures, which most physicians considered as dreadful and disgraceful. The barber surgeons, apart from trimming hair, had to perform amputations, enemas, bloodletting, and even tooth pulling. All this was done without any modern anesthetic. Performing amputations was the most horrid job for barber surgeons, as it involved rolling the skin back from the crushed limb and using a knife to cut all of the flesh and muscle from around the bone. All this while the patient would be screaming in agony. Number 1. Groom of stool. For several centuries, kings used to consider wiping their own bottoms inappropriate. Hence, a groom of stool would be appointed for them. This was supposedly an esteemed position, even though it was highly humiliating. The groom of stool would be required to bring the toilet chair whenever the king needed it, and then wipe his behind when he was done with his job. He would then be required to collect the king's stool and properly examine it for checking his health, and also administer an enema should the king feel constipated.
Please click the subscribe link below to get updates on new videos from us.